I'm Nancy Zingroni. I am a psychologist. I was trained at the University of Edinburgh. My husband, Carlos S. Alvarado, and I all have collaborated together as research scientists and as educators in the marginal field of parapsychology for around a little bit over 30 years. At the moment, we are both teaching our own courses here on wiziq.com, and we are instructors at the Ryan Education Center, and we have our own educational project that's part of our little consulting business called the AZIRE. And AZIRE stands for Alvarado Zingroni Institute for Research and Education. Now, this sounds very fancy, but essentially it exists in two places. It's a learning center in the virtual world, Second Life, and it is a Moodle installation at theazire.org/Moodle, where we and colleagues of ours teach courses on a variety of different topics, not just on parapsychology. Parapsychology is a marginal discipline because it has never been fully accepted into mainstream science. We have individuals primarily from psychology and from physics. So these are individuals who have conventional training in these other two fields and who bring that training to the investigation of these putative abilities, these phenomena, such as telepathy and precognition and clairvoyance and a sort of orphan phenomena that seem to indicate the human being is a bit more than what general materialism would suppose, such as the out-of-body experience and apparitions and so on. We also have sociologists and anthropologists. That's a very big area that's growing at the moment. Historians, people in the humanities, physicians. There are a number of people that are interested in this field and in pursuing the research and passing it on. One of the things that is different about people of my generation, and particularly about Carlos and I, is that 30 years ago, there was some education in the field in the United States that was more formal than what we have now. As we go along, we'll talk about education in the UK and in Australia, what's on offer in Brazil and so on. But in the United States, there's basically nothing at the moment except for the adult education courses of the Ryan Education Center and a couple of online universities that offer single courses and a few professors around the country who are able to supervise students within programs that are set up on similar types of topics at their universities. We had a different experience of obtaining the foundational information of the field. And like any other field of endeavor, parapsychology has a body of knowledge that underlies it. Theory, research methodology, the taxonomy of the phenomena itself, and then over 130 years of actual research. Carlos, for instance, obtained a Master's of Science degree at John F. Kennedy University in California when that school was offering the Master's of Science back from the late 1970s through the late 1980s. And I was lucky enough to find a professor at Mundelein College in Chicago, which is now part of Loyola University, who was able to put together an introductory course, also supervise senior theses for students in psychology. And there was another university in Chicago as well that had an introductory course in parapsychology and a research seminar course. And I also took those. So I actually had 15 hours of undergraduate education in the field. So what we're going to talk about now is the problem that we face in the field at the moment. And so we're going to take a look at what the history of education in the field has been like. This is, by the way, a picture of the University of Freiburg, and I'll say why that's important in a minute. So back in the day when I was a student, the American Society for Psychical Research in New York City had an education department that was run by a wonderful lady named Marian Nestor. And she and her colleagues put out many editions of a small pamphlet called, I think it was Courses and Study Opportunities in Parapsychology. And what they did was they had contact with a lot of people around the field. They kept their ears to the ground as to what was going on. And this pamphlet, it gave to the student information about what universities and colleges around the world had educational opportunities, as well as a segment in that same pamphlet on adult education possibilities. I'm only going to focus on university education because what any discipline needs is an underpinning of college level, graduate school level, higher order education in the theories and methods and history of any field. So in 1983, Marian Nestor and her colleagues counted 66 universities and colleges that had at least one course. Many had faculty members who were willing to supervise people at the master's and doctoral level, and a couple had actual programs that had parapsychology as part of it, that you could actually go in there and officially engage with parapsychology. For example, John F. Kennedy University was offering the master's at that time, and Franklin Pierce University, then Franklin Pierce College up in Rindge, New Hampshire, had a minor in the Department of Psychology that was dedicated to the study of parapsychology. So there were opportunities to either get a degree and do research, or to at least get a series of courses in the field, as opposed to just a single course. Examples were the University of Edinburgh, which was a single faculty member, Dr. John Beloff, who was supervising PhD students in the psychology department who did parapsychological research or research of some sort or another on what seemed to be psychic phenomena, and were able to obtain a PhD in psychology on the basis of that dissertation work. Saybrook Institute, now Saybrook University, that recently moved from San Francisco to Oakland. Again, an individual, University of California, Davis, where Charles Tart, the psychologist who's probably best known for his work in altered states of consciousness, would supervise. John F. Kennedy University, that had the MSc in parapsychology, and the University of Freiburg in Germany, which had, since Hans Bender became a professor there, back in the 50s, had some opportunities for from either Dr. Bender during his lifetime or other individuals to again do what Saybrook and other schools did, allow a single professor to supervise people to the master's and PhD level, and then an individual course. In 2011, in a study that I did in preparation to submit a proposal to a national accreditation agency here in the United States on behalf of Atlantic University in Virginia, we were trying to get approval for an MA in parapsychology at Atlantic, which is an online school that already offers an accredited MA in transpersonal studies. So we were trying to kick it up a notch from the point at which you could have a single course in the field and then pursue a master's with relevant connections to the field, to the point of actually having a degree, an online degree. At that point, I surveyed the universities and schools and the faculty members that I knew and people that I knew, and came up with 43 universities and colleges. Now that's a drop-off, but it was a drop-off with kind of a positive underpinning to it, in that instead of being a group of schools that had, in the main, a single course or a single individual willing to supervise, the amount of actual either formal courses or a professor that had more than one student, so there's a unit there, there's a group of people that are doing similar research and can talk to each other. More graduate opportunities for research and for master's and PhD degrees were available within this new group of 43 schools. So fewer single courses were being taught. There were more faculty members willing to supervise people through senior thesis or master's or doctorate, which is more important, and more places where there was a more formal master's or doctoral possibility with a small research group attached to it. Now, the difference between my list and the list that Marian Nestor put together back in the 80s for the 9th edition of their pamphlet is that she focused on people who had this purely positive point of view towards psychic phenomena. Yes, it exists, and we're going to work on it. And there wasn't this integration of people doing anomalistic psychology, which for some is bringing conventional explanations to what looks like psychic phenomena but is not. Or people who within a psychology department or another discipline hold this neutral position and supervise and entertain and honor both points of view. The search for conventional hypotheses to explain how people can have these experiences and attribute paranormality to them, and the proponent point of view, which is there's a phenomena here, there are real experiences here, there's something that needs to be explained in a way that extends what we already know about sensation and perception and human information processing, and maybe in fact about the nature of who and what we are as human beings. So the new list contains, while it doesn't contain lots of places with this kind of conventional focus, because in general, in the past, people with a conventional, people with this anomalistic psychology kind of point of view, whether they called it that or not, didn't tend to do research and didn't tend to pull graduate students around them, didn't tend to test out these conventional hypotheses. And more of that, thank God, is happening now. So now we've got this kind of better mixture. It's certainly not evenly divided between the two possibilities, but we have this better mixture of opportunities for people with both points of view. So it's actually good news, even though there are fewer schools on my list, and I may have missed some. The type of education that's being given is broader and more and deeper as well. So it's both taking both sides of the coin into account and taking the student to higher levels of education and research opportunities. So examples of these, for instance, are the University of Northampton, which has a very big group in a unit that studies anomalous processes. The University of Edinburgh still. In the meantime, there was something else going on. Professor Robert Morris was alive from 1985 to 2004, and the unit was very much focused on scientific study of psychic phenomena and had lots of real estate in the building and lots of students and more research. And now we have two professors, not professors in the UK sense, but in the American sense. We have a senior lecturer and a senior reader who are part of that original group, who are both supervising students in master's and PhDs and senior theses at the undergraduate level and teaching courses in anomalistic psychology. Not as big, a little bit more balanced, but it's still there. Saybrook University is another one of these single professors who can mentor someone through, or maybe a small group of professors through their human consciousness MA and PhD program. University of Freiburg does not have a research unit, has faculty members that are interested, but in the town of Freiburg is the IGPP, which I'm not going to try and say because my German is non-existent, but this is an institute that has existed for quite a long time and was founded, I believe, by Dr. Hans Bender back in the day. It has an enormous, I would say the best library on the planet devoted to academic, scientific, and popular culture um, and materials that focus on this whole effort to kind of sort out what that phenomena really is. And the University of Sao Paulo, another example, which is a small unit inside of the psychology department called Interc, and Dr. Wellington Zangari, who's a full professor of the social psychology of religion, is supervising a large group of students, and they are definitely in this model of anomalistic psychology, where there is just as much emphasis on what is what looks like psi phenomena but may not be, and the proponent point of view that these kinds of phenomena indicate that there's something more. So this is tip of the iceberg, but when you think about conventional disciplines such as psychology or physics or sociology or anthropology, those disciplines are spread across the planet in virtually every university. There are so many opportunities for a student to get either online or on-site at least a beginning education in those fields, and in most cases a very solid education that can continue up from undergraduate through the PhD level. And we're sitting in 43 universities, the majority of those opportunities being relatively limited. So the good news is here that there are more universities with concentrations of students interested in similar topics. There are more faculty members who are willing to mentor a student through a project, a paper, and who are willing to supervise theses or dissertations within another discipline's department, primarily psychology. There are more online libraries and online courses and online lectures and conference presentations that are available for independent study. And actually, this illustration is from Scott H. Young's blog, a particular blog post that's very interesting called Self-Education Failings. So there are some limitations to being self-educated in the field, but that's certainly one way to get there. The bad news is within university-based programs, there are single courses or a minimum sequence of courses. Maybe you get 2 at the maximum, that acquaint students with the field of history, literature, with the history and the literature, the institutions and the people in the field itself. So this is kind of what's missing, is you don't get socialized into the wider world of actual research into this field in parapsychology so well. I mean, there are opportunities. We'll talk about that. There's ways to do that for yourself, and there's ways that the people who are in these universities that have groups or programs can make these connections. But it's not this kind of automatic sequence of events that most individuals are able to get in a conventional discipline. The students are actually likely to graduate with a deep knowledge in the field in which their degree is taken, so psychology, anthropology, sociology, etc. And that's important because, again, this is an interdisciplinary problem domain. There are connections with everything that is under the microscope, so to speak, in parapsychology and other disciplines and other sciences. No matter what a hardened skeptic might tell you, there's not only a database here, but there are solid connections that start at the beginning of the field and run right up to today that solid connections to mainstream science, even if we're over that barrier between what's accepted and what's not. Proficiency in the field then for students and for researchers and for everybody it requires this lifelong commitment to self-education. And we would like to ameliorate that in some way by providing more materials for people to use to get that kind of self-education. But we would also like to raise the discussion that we need more opportunities for shared experiences that are more formal. So what does this mean? It means that the knowledge of the field itself is extremely variable among students and researchers. People have an understanding of the field that's very idiosyncratic. So the usual elephant and the blind men illustration, although this is an elephant with scientists trying to figure out what the heck the elephant is. In a sense, it's not that funny that we don't have shared experiences, and that you can be in a room of people who've been in the field for 20 years, and many of them have no idea that the kinds of things they're doing now were done in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s and the 1880s. And others who are more conversant with what came before, but maybe are so narrow that they're not really sure what's going on in the physics side of the field or in the anthropology side of the field. They haven't read the history of the time period that they're interested in. They're not really aware of so many things. So we all have these kind of piecemeal educations because of the way that we've had to get them. Even for students who are in a program, the amount of education they receive in the field proper is usually limited to 1 to 3 courses, and this is because the programs exist inside a regular department of another discipline. So obviously, if you're training yourself up for a master's or a PhD in that discipline, you need to be expert in that discipline. You need to understand that discipline. If you're doing what is relevant to us, a research-based thesis or dissertation that speaks directly to the phenomena or the scientific problems of our field, that's something that you have to find on your own. You have to, you have recourse through your faculty member and the other students in the program to information about what you're all doing and what's the zeitgeist of that particular program and so on. But there isn't a lot of time left for you to actually get a grounding in the field. You narrowly focus in on whatever is relevant to the project at hand. So there's no standardized curriculum in the field available to people even in those programs. So you're pretty sure that, what they are getting is competently taught but may not have a focus on various aspects of the field. So it's a narrower kind of experience. And then for those folks who are really interested in self-education and who are attempting to bring themselves up to speed in the discipline as a whole, there's no standardized curriculum in the field that's available. That there's no one-stop shop where you can get the information that you need, or you can get the bibliography that you need, or you can prepare a program for yourself of reading and so on that will give you what a degree in another field would give you as an undergraduate or in the master's and PhD levels. Now, obviously, the kinds of things that we study are better built upon other disciplines as a base because you need the knowledge of physics if that's the direction your research is going to go, and you need knowledge of psychology if that's the direction your research is going to go, anthropology if that's your direction, and so on. You need that grounding. But you don't have that second step that allows you to get a good, broad vision of what goes on in the field. Now, from 1976, I think, until the early 2000s, the Rhine Research Center offered a summer study program that happened every summer for 8 weeks and brought in not only had maybe between 20 and 30 lectures by researchers in the field, about half of them done by the much larger research staff that was at the Rhine Research Center at the time, and the other half brought to you by the person that actually was doing that type of research and who was published and well known and so on. And the students would come in and get this nice wide overview that had connections, very serious connections to the field itself. And then many of them would go from the summer study program to the August meeting of the Parapsychological Association, and then to the September meeting of the Society for Psychical Research, and it kind of capped off a 3 or 4 month period of concentrated study with people who were doing the work in the field. No longer available, doesn't exist. So the consequences of all of this is that we assume when we get to the level of being researchers and being professional academics and scientists who have a serious interest in the field, we all assume we're on the same page, but we're not. When you start talking to people about the history of the field, or, oh, you know, that sounds like such and so that did this study in 1960, you are just as likely to get blank looks from a seasoned researcher as you are from an introductory student. It depends on how we got our education. So the knowledge, especially of the earlier eras, gets completely lost. Now, there are areas in disciplines and individuals who believe what didn't happen 2 years ago, it doesn't count. But everything that happened in the last 2 years in every science on the planet, in every educational endeavor in the humanities, whatever it is, all of that stuff that happened in the last 2 years is founded on something that happened before. And in many fields, it goes back 200 years or 300 years or 400 years or whatever. And even though you're not going to become, you know, totally conversant in what went on in the Scottish Enlightenment in the 18th century in your field, because that's more than you really need to know, you generally know what the recent history, say the last 150 years, was, and you've read some of the classic texts, and you've seen how people have got from a particular theory to another. In this field, that's very difficult to get. So that knowledge is lost. And then you find, because we don't know our history and because we don't have the systematic training, we're constantly reinventing the wheel, and maybe not even doing it quite as well as our predecessors had done. This is not usual, but it happens, and it's a consequence of the kind of fractured education we have in the field. So how do we fix this? The first thing is to support the adult education programs where they exist. Right now, the Australian Institute of Psychological Research has a 2-course sequence. It's very good. Dr. Caroline Watt at the Department of Psychology at University of Edinburgh offers an adult education online course, which is very good, and is probably the only place you can get an online course that has a sustained balance between the conventional theorists and those on the yes, it's psychic and let's figure out what that means side of the line. And then the Rhine Education Center, which has been offering online courses for some years, has just recently expanded its curriculum, is now expanding its faculty, and is trying to set up a systematic kind of education with a variety of different certificates so that you can go there and you can get exposed to the literature, you can talk to people that are interested as you're interested, and then you can kind of move through a sequence. My husband and I have recently founded a YouTube channel called Parapsychology Online. You may be watching this lecture on that YouTube channel. And we are dedicated to putting up individual lectures and guides to education, as well as setting up playlists that will bring in those talks that are out on the internet that are very important to understanding the scientific side of the field, whether it's from the conventional perspective or from the proponent perspective. So however you approach these phenomena, we're hoping to beef up this channel to the point that you can get what you need as a first stop. It's still not what we hope to have in the future, which is some formal standardized curriculum that people can go through in a variety of different places. The next thing is to support institutions in their efforts to put their video and their written materials online and make them accessible, especially the ones that are, whether or not they're formally connected to the open educational resource movement, or they're just doing their best to put as much out there for free as they can. Another place is the Institute for Consciousness Research Laboratories, which is a continuation of the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Laboratory, put together by Brenda Dunn and Dr. Bob John. And they also offer a series of webinars that are free unless you want to download them. Then there's a small donation that are at a very high level in terms of physics and the understanding of the theoretical underpinnings of the field. So there are places where you can cobble together online, especially good coursework that can help you get to that point of having a wider view of the field and a deeper view of some of the research areas. So that's an important thing to do, is to support those websites and individuals. And then you want to use the institutional websites that also bring these kinds of materials out. For instance, the Society for Psychical Research is a very good point of contact for the field, and will be getting better. They've recently gotten a bequest that they're focusing quite a bit of that money into educational activities. You want to support the YouTube channels. Parapsychology Online is ours. The Rhine Research Center is expanding, but especially channels that are already offering a significant amount of their materials to the public, like the Society for Scientific Exploration, which Brenda Dunn and Bob John have been involved with since it was founded in 1983. They put up all of their conference materials, videos from conference presentations onto their YouTube site, and on their actual website you can get the journals themselves going back for many years for free. And the Parapsychological Association, while it doesn't have a YouTube channel as yet, if you are a member of the association, and there are ways to be either a professional member, you've got degrees, you're doing research and so on, or to be a supporting member, which means you're just interested in the field. And those memberships give you access to the lectures of the presentations that were made at the annual convention, as well as other types of materials. And that's in progress. That's not all the way up to date. You want to support also the online libraries in the field, such as Lexine. That's www.lexscien.org. This is a low-cost subscription website with a better price for students that has the complete runs of the proceedings of the Society for Psychical Research, the Journal of the Society, the Journal of the Society for Scientific Exploration, the Journal of Parapsychology, European Journal of Parapsychology, a whole variety of ever-expanding online materials that are available to you, and every word's a keyword. You can search the entire database for something you're working on. That's extremely important as well. And then you want to, if you're teaching in one of these courses or one of these programs, or you are a mentor, and there are people out there who are in this position where they're running a unit, or they're regularly bringing in students, or they're designing online education, or designing on-site education, or whatever, what we really ask is that you try to create an environment in which you're encouraging your students to know the field as well as they know their own narrow area. Where do the scientists in the field come from, and what has been done before, and are there other materials that are available to feed into your own interests? So that basically what you're doing is, even though in practical terms, when you're doing a master's or a PhD in anthropology or psychology or sociology or physics or whatever it is, you have to be conversant in that discipline, and you must know what you need to know to do your research. If you are the student, or if you are a faculty member guiding a student, try to get a handle on the wider context as well, insofar as you can. I mean, that's really important. So you want people to be grounded in the field. And hopefully, as we go forward, the Parapsychological Association, the Parapsychology Foundation, which has a number of websites full of great information, hopefully the institutions in the field will be able to help more and more and more with this self-education activity. But eventually we'd like to be in a situation where there is somewhere that people can get a contact with a standardized curriculum. The message is, our context is one in which it's difficult to reproduce what mainstream sciences have got. And to be honest, no matter how far across that barrier our field tends to get, we are an interdisciplinary problem domain, so some of these educational problems are going to continue just because that's the nature of the thing that we're all doing. The problems are, as I've outlined them, that it's very difficult to pull together this kind of foundational knowledge. You can do it through dedicated self-education. You can do it by taking advantage of what's available. And the needs for the future are that those connections to other fields of science and those the willingness to balance conventional hypotheses against the quote-unquote psi or paranormal hypothesis. That's very important. But what's most important is to continue to expand and to set up some kind of standardized curriculum that even if you can't follow it in an educational situation, you can follow it as someone who is committed to contributing to the field. So that's the message, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please click the subscribe button and subscribe to Parapsychology Online if that's where you saw it, or go back to Parapsychology Online on YouTube and subscribe to us there. Please take a look around the field and examine what's available out there, and go through Parapsychology Online's primer series, which also gives you some information. But basically just get out there and see what you can learn, and think about what you're doing and where you're doing it and how you can help raise up this shared experience in the field. And definitely honor and take advantage of the online opportunities that are available, even if they're in adult education, such as the one that's offered by University of Edinburgh and the Australian Institute of Psychical Research, and of course the Rhine Education Center here in the States. So thank you so much for listening.